strength, it is a necessary condition for depth. Just as a drought forces the oak to anchor itself into the bedrock, the dry seasons of life, the financial struggles, the personal losses, the periods of isolation, are the exact moments when the internal roots can be driven deeper. Countless hours are spent in the gym, sculpting an iron facade for the world to see. Yet a dangerous paradox exists. A society obsessed with sculpting the perfect physique while the inner foundation quietly erodes. In ancient times, the concept of the gymnasium wasn't limited to sweat and iron. It was born from the Greek word Gimnado, a term that originally demanded the rigorous training of the soul. Just as physical muscles atrophy without tension, the human spirit becomes fragile without the discipline of a spiritual gym. As the noise of the holidays fades and a new year beckons, the true test of strength isn't found in a mirror. It is found in the hidden depths of the heart, where a different kind of exercise determines whether a person will stand firm or crumble when the storms of life inevitably arrive. The world today feels increasingly unpredictable. Every headline seems to carry the weight of a shifting reality, leaving many with a sense that the ground beneath their feet is no longer as solid as it once was. This constant hum of anxiety is not just about the events occurring on the global stage, but about a deeper fear that the stability people have worked so hard to build might actually be a fragile shell. Consider the events of late May 2010 in Guatemala City. Tropical storm Agatha had just finished its course, and the winds had died down. One might have thought the danger had passed. However, in the heart of the downtown district, a 300-foot deep sinkhole suddenly opened. It was a terrifying, almost silent moment. Within seconds, a 3-story factory building, massive electricity poles, and everything nearby were sucked into a dark crater. There was no thunderous warning, just a sudden, absolute collapse. What causes such a catastrophe? A sinkhole is a master of deception. It is created when the rock underneath the surface is easily dissolved by water. As rain or drainage seeps into those hidden layers, it quietly eats away at the core. For years, the surface can look stable and strong. People walk over it, build on it, and trust it. But underneath, there is a growing, hollow void. This is the concept of silent erosion, and it is far more dangerous than any visible storm. A storm is loud. A storm can be tracked on a map and prepared for with boarded windows and emergency supplies. But silent erosion is stealthy. It happens in the dark, out of sight, and without a sound. It is the slow, unaddressed decay of the foundation that eventually makes a collapse inevitable. Human lives often reflect this geological danger. A life may look secure on the surface, validated by a steady career, a respectable reputation, and the outward tokens of success. But when a person is too busy to examine the heart, or when habitual sin and unaddressed character flaws begin to dissolve the inner life, they are sitting on a fragile base. The normal process of living, or even a minor life challenge, can suddenly expose these hidden vulnerabilities. The lesson from Guatemala City is clear. The collapse is not the beginning of the problem. It is the end of a long, invisible process. It is the silent erosion of the inner world that leads to the most devastating external consequences. If the foundation is being eaten away by neglect, it is not a matter of if a collapse will happen, but when. Many individuals strive to live with integrity, to work hard, and to build a life that commands respect. They follow the rules, invest in their families, and contribute to their communities. Yet a heart-wrenching question often arises when tragedy strikes. What happens when a person does everything right and the storm still comes anyway? Looking back at the catastrophic sinkhole in Guatemala City, there is a chilling detail that is often overlooked. The individuals working inside that 3-story factory were not responsible for the geological instability beneath them. They were not neglectful, nor were they digging their own grave. They were simply doing their jobs, diligent and focused on their daily tasks. but the ground collapsed nonetheless. This reality points to a profound source of pain in the human experience. It is the realization that a sinkhole in life is not always something a person digs for themselves through poor choices or hidden character flaws. Sometimes the collapse is triggered by forces entirely outside of an individual's control. This is the pain of the external sinkhole. Consider the person who has invested decades into a marriage, believing the foundation was solid and the commitment was mutual, only to be met with the sudden and unwanted reality of divorce. Or think of the employee who has given their best years and deepest loyalty to a company, only to be handed a layoff notice because of a corporate decision made in a distant boardroom. In these moments, the natural cry of the heart is, "Why is this happening? I followed the rules. I built it right." While the pain is undeniable and the unfairness is real, a critical shift in perspective must occur for the spirit to survive. The inquiry cannot remain on the why of the disaster because the world is inherently unpredictable and often non-discerning in its storms. Instead, the focus must move to a deeper, more vital question. Where exactly was the foundation laid? If a person's sense of security is anchored solely in the loyalty of another human being or in the perceived stability of a career, they are essentially building on borrowed land. Human beings, despite their best intentions, are flawed. Economic systems, despite their promises, are volatile. These things, as valuable as they are, do not constitute the rock. They are like the easily dissolved limestone that creates the hidden caverns of a sinkhole. There is a vital distinction to be made between a collapsed circumstance and a collapsed person. When the ground falls away, it reveals what the life was truly attached to. A foundation built on eternal values and an unwavering connection to the divine is like a tower anchored into an ancient mountain. The surrounding terrain may crumble, the factory may vanish, and the social structures may fail, but the core identity of the individual remains standing. The hard truth is that storms have no eyes, and sinkholes do not select for character. However, there is great peace in knowing that while the geological shifts of life cannot be controlled, the depth of the anchor can be. The journey inward leads to a place where security is no longer found in the shifting sands of human favor or worldly success. It is found in the unshakable bedrock of eternal truth, where even when the earth gives way, the soul remains secure. One must decide today, while the ground still feels firm, exactly what or who is holding up the weight of their life. In the modern world, there is a subtle but destructive enemy that often wears the mask of productivity. It is called frenzy. Most people refer to it simply as being busy, but there is a profound difference between being busy with a purpose and being frantic without a foundation. While productive work builds a life, frenzy only serves to hide the cracks in one. Busyness for many has become a socially acceptable drug. It acts as a powerful sedative used to repress inner fears and personal anxieties. People rush from one task to the next, filling every waking second with noise, notifications, and meetings. But what is the underlying reason behind this relentless pace? Often, it is because the silence has become too loud. In the quiet, the deep questions of the heart begin to surface. And for many, those questions feel overwhelming. So the choice is made to embrace frenzy instead. Individuals get so busy that they no longer have to think about what is truly important. They cover up the truth of their own lives by staying in constant motion. This type of busyness acts as a temporary patch for an internal void. When a person refuses to provide a place for spiritual direction, all that remains is the frenzied agenda of a hassled existence. It is a state of being hurried, but not healthy. It looks like progress on the surface, but on the inside, it is a desperate attempt to stay one step ahead of a collapse. James Houston once noted that busyness for many people acts to repress inner fears. We get busy because we cannot deal with what is really true. This struggle is particularly evident for those currently wrestling with financial burdens or the heavy weight of survival. When bills are piling up and the future feels unpredictable, the natural reaction is to move faster, work longer, and worry more. In these high-pressure moments, it is easy to view peace or stillness as a luxury, something reserved for those who have already achieved security. However, the reality is quite the opposite. Stillness is not a luxury, it is a vital survival tool. When a person is in the middle of a financial storm, frenzy only serves to cloud the judgment. It leads to reactive decisions and keeps the heart in a permanent state of fight or flight. But by stepping back, by choosing the discipline of solitude even for a few moments, the perspective changes. Stillness allows the mind to stop merely reacting to the waves and start listening for the way forward. It is the difference between a captain who is frantically bailing water out of a leaking ship and a captain who stops for a moment to find the source of the leak and fix the hull. Stillness provides the clarity needed to navigate the unknown. Without it, a person is simply a victim of their circumstances, driven by the winds of the day. Frenzy is the first great distraction that prevents a solid foundation from being built. It is a deceptive trap that promises success, but only delivers exhaustion. But as dangerous as frenzy is, there is a second distraction that often goes unnoticed because it feels so comfortable. It is the danger of familiarity. While frenzy is a loud and chaotic distraction, there is a second enemy that is far more subtle and deceptive. It is the danger of familiarity. This occurs when an individual becomes so accustomed to the outward tokens of wisdom, faith, or discipline that those truths no longer carry the power to draw the heart inward. It is a dangerous state where a person possesses a form of godliness while having none of the actual power behind it. In the field of psychology, this phenomenon is often referred to as hedonic adaptation, or more specifically, sensory blindness. It is a natural mechanism designed to protect the brain from overstimulation. When a person is exposed to a constant scent, a recurring sound, or a familiar sight, the brain eventually filters it out as background noise. The information is still present, but the mind has stopped listening. This same mechanism can be devastating to the inner life. When profound truths are heard repeatedly but never translated into action, the soul develops a spiritual callousness. The brain decides that these words are no longer relevant because they have no practical impact on daily behavior. This is how a person can spend decades in the presence of life-changing wisdom and remain entirely unchanged. The sensory blindness has killed the capacity for the soul to be moved. The ancient story of Samson serves as a haunting example of this cognitive barrier. Samson was a man granted extraordinary strength, yet he became so familiar with his power that he began to treat it with casual indifference. He lived as though his strength was an entitlement rather than a trust. The tragedy reached its peak when he woke from his sleep, intending to face his enemies as he had done before, unaware that his strength had departed. He had become so familiar with the external rituals of his life that he failed to notice when the internal source of his power had evaporated. This type of familiarity leads to a state described as being alive in name but dead in reality. It is the condition of the Church of Laodicea, where individuals claim to be rich and in need of nothing, yet were truly wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. They had become so familiar with the outward symbols of their success that they could no longer see their internal poverty. The reason these old truths often lose their impact is a lack of effective practice. When wisdom is treated as a static object, like a novel to be read, rather than a transfusion to be received, it loses its life-giving quality. There is often a famine of hearing, not because there is a lack of bread, but because there is a lack of appetite. To overcome the barrier of familiarity, one must stop approaching truth as a casual acquaintance and begin to treat it as a vital necessity. Transformation only occurs when the heart moves beyond the letter of the law and engages with the spirit. Without this active engagement, the inner life remains a fragile shell, sitting on a base of shallow familiarity, waiting for a storm to reveal the emptiness within. If the distractions of frenzy and familiarity are the walls blocking the path, then the discipline of solitude is the door that leads inward. In a world that refuses to be quiet, the human heart requires a deliberate space where it can finally listen. Solitude is not merely the absence of noise or the absence of people. It is a technical solution for a chaotic existence. It is the spiritual gymnasium where the internal muscles are developed through the power of stillness. However, a significant question often arises when discussing this practice. How does a person distinguish between the voice of truth and the mere echoes of their own fears or desires? It is a valid skepticism. The human mind can be compared to a room filled with several different radios, all playing at maximum volume. There is the radio of social media, the radio of past failures, and the radio of future anxiety. Together they create a chaotic, white noise that drowns out the frequency of the soul. To find the correct frequency, an individual must learn to step out of the traffic, as the Message translation of Psalm 46:10 suggests. To hear a whisper in the middle of a loud concert is impossible. One must move away from the crowd. Identifying this specific frequency of stillness involves looking for three distinct, unshakable marks. First, the frequency of truth is characterized by consistency. It never contradicts the eternal values found in the Word of God. While the world's opinions shift like the wind, the voice of the divine is as stable as bedrock. If an inner prompting suggests a path that violates integrity, kindness, or justice, it is not a word from God. It is the voice of the ego or a hidden addiction. Truth is always anchored in the unchanging nature of the Creator. Second, this frequency brings peace. There is a profound difference between the frantic pressure of a gut feeling and the unwavering calm of a settled conviction. The voice of fear is always hurried, pushing the individual to act out of panic or a sense of impending doom. It shouts that time is running out. In contrast, the voice of truth brings a sense of peace, even when it asks a person to do something difficult or uncomfortable. It provides a quiet assurance that, regardless of the external storms, the internal path is secure. Third, the frequency of truth offers clarity. Fear thrives on confusion and urgency. It thrives on the frenzy mentioned earlier, keeping the mind in a state of fight or flight. But truth leads with a piercing light that clears away the fog of distraction. It does not demand a frantic reaction. It invites a purposeful response. It replaces the hassled discipleship with a focused direction. When a person chooses to be still and know that God is God, they are not escaping reality. They are engaging with a higher reality. Stillness is the bridge that allows a person to move from the noise of the world to the fellowship of the heart. By practicing this solitude, the individual stops being a victim of the world's agenda and starts becoming a student of the eternal. This discipline of quietness is the prerequisite for the next stage of the journey, ensuring that the wisdom being heard is actually being built into the foundation of the life. Information is more accessible today than at any other point in human history. A person can carry a library of wisdom in their pocket, listen to 100 sermons a year, and quote the deepest philosophies with ease. But there is a deceptive trap hidden within this abundance of knowledge. It is the illusion that knowing a truth is the same as living it. Many individuals spend their lives accumulating blueprints for a magnificent life, yet they remain exposed to the elements because they have never picked up a single brick. Imagine a person standing in the middle of a vacant lot during a freezing rainstorm. In their hands, they hold a set of perfect architectural blueprints for a sturdy, warm home. They might study every line, admire the architect's genius, and even memorize the dimensions of every room. But the blueprint does not provide shelter. It does not block the wind or hold back the rain. In fact, under the pressure of a real storm, that paper becomes a soggy, useless weight. The tragedy of many lives is that they are being lived under the illusion of the blueprint. They read about peace, yet remain anxious. They study the concept of forgiveness, yet hold on to decades of bitterness. They have the specs for a strong foundation, but they are still standing on bare dirt. Reading about the inward journey is not the journey itself. The journey requires the renewal of the mind, which is a spiritual transfusion. Worldly, negative, and sinful thoughts are not removed by a simple act of will. They are forced out when truth is actively pressed into the mind. This process of transformation requires moving beyond the eyes and into the hands. There is a specific, energetic process for translating information into a foundation. It begins when an individual learns to accept the truth, to hear it not as a suggestion, but as a reality. This is followed by anticipation, where one looks at the day ahead with the expectation that this truth will be needed. Then comes appreciation, recognizing that this wisdom is supernatural in its origin and character. But the process is only completed in application. This is where the work becomes difficult. Application is the moment when a person chooses to be still when they want to be frantic, or chooses to forgive when they want to strike back. A person who hears these words and does them is likened to a wise builder who dug deep and laid the foundation on a rock. The building did not fall because it was well-founded. The difference between the house that stood and the house that collapsed was not what the builders knew, it was what they did. One builder looked at the blueprint and started digging. The other builder looked at the blueprint and decided that looking was enough. As a new year begins, the challenge is to move past the accumulation of information and into the hard, rewarding labor of construction. The storm will not care how much a person has read. It will only care about what has been built. Imagine two houses standing side by side on the very same street. To any observer passing by, these homes appear identical. They share the same architectural style, the same vibrant colors, and the same welcoming appearance. In the quiet sunshine of a calm afternoon, there is no discernible difference between them. Both look stable. Both look secure. Both look like a place where a life could be safely lived. However, the true story of these houses is not found in their walls or their windows, but in what lies beneath them. One house is built by a person who chose the path of least resistance. This individual was satisfied with the appearance of stability, settling for a foundation of sand. Sand represents the choice of compromise, the ease of superficiality, and the dangerous comfort of a life lived only on the surface. It is the form of godliness without the actual power. Building on sand is fast, it is cheap, and it requires no deep internal labor. It is the choice to prioritize how a life looks over what a life actually is. The other house is built by someone who understood the necessity of depth. This individual engaged in the grueling work of digging past the soft earth until they reach the bedrock. This is the rock. It is important to realize that the rock is not a mere idea or a collection of blueprints. The rock consists of values that are lived out in the heat of the day and the quiet of the night. It is the result of the spiritual gymnasium, the Gimnado, where discipline and integrity are forged through daily practice. Building on the rock is often slow and invisible to others, but it is the only way to ensure that the internal structure matches the external promise. The reality remains that for every life, the storm is an inevitability, not a possibility. The rain eventually descends, the floods rise, and the winds beat against the house. The storm is perfectly non-discriminatory. It does not care about the social standing, the reputation, or the intentions of the builder. It hits every house with the same relentless force. In that moment of crisis, a profound truth is revealed. The storm does not have the power to change a person's nature. It only has the mission to reveal it. The storm does not create the weakness in the sand-built life. It simply exposes the erosion that was already there. Likewise, the storm does not grant strength to the rock-built life. It merely confirms the unshakable foundation that was established in the quiet hours of discipline. The choice between the rock and the sand is made every single day, long before the clouds appear. It is made in the decision to seek solitude, to practice prayer, and to apply truth rather than just accumulate information. When the earth eventually gives way and the external structures fail, only the life anchored in eternal bedrock will remain. The ground is shifting, and the choice of foundation is the most critical decision a person will ever make. While the sinkhole serves as a terrifying warning of internal erosion, nature offers a far more hopeful symbol of what it means to be well-founded. Consider the great oak trees that remain standing long after a devastating hurricane has passed. When the surrounding landscape is littered with fallen timber, these giants remain upright, seemingly unshakable. The secret to their survival is not found in the thickness of their trunks or the spread of their branches, but in an invisible architecture hidden beneath the soil. In the study of resilience biology, a fascinating distinction is made between different types of root systems. Many trees develop lateral roots that spread wide and shallow, just beneath the surface. These roots are designed for convenience. They easily soak up surface water and nutrients during the good seasons. But trees that rely solely on these shallow systems are the first to fall when the winds howl and the ground becomes saturated. They have width, but they lack depth. True endurance, however, is found in the development of a taproot. A taproot is a singular, powerful anchor that drives straight down, deep into the earth. And here is the profound law of standing firm. The taproot often grows most aggressively during periods of extreme drought. When the surface water vanishes and the earth becomes parched, the tree is forced to send its life search deeper. It is the very harshness of the environment, the lack of easy resources, that compels the tree to find the underground streams that never run dry. This biological reality mirrors the journey of the human spirit. Adversity is not merely a test of recent to eternal truth. Without the challenge, there is no reason for the root to go deep. Without the storm, there is no proof of the anchor. The sinkhole is what happens when a void is allowed to grow in the dark. The taproot is what happens when discipline is practiced in the dark. One leads to a sudden collapse, while the other leads to an unshakable resilience. It is a reminder that the inward journey is not a luxury for the easy times, but a survival strategy for the hard times. The goal is to move beyond a life quantified by the width of external success and toward a life qualified by the depth of the internal anchor. The storm does not have the final word. The depth of the root does. The journey inward is the most critical expedition a person will ever undertake. In a world that prizes the visible and the loud, it is the invisible and the quiet that determine the final outcome of a life. The message remains clear. Do not wait for a sinkhole to reveal an internal void. Instead, let a deep, resilient root system speak of the discipline practiced in the dark. A practical starting point exists for anyone seeking this unshakable foundation. It begins by dedicating the first 15 minutes of the coming day to absolute silence. This is not a luxury. It is the deliberate construction of a spiritual gymnasium. By stepping away from the frenzy and tuning out the noise, the heart finally finds its correct frequency. There is a profound blessing for those who choose this path, a hope for unyielding strength and steady peace amidst the unpredictable sinkholes of this world. May the roots go deep, and may the foundation always hold firm.